Bonjour tout le monde, je me présente, je suis François Ledard, je suis responsable des projets chez RS Components et notamment en charge de la thématique autour de solutions pour la maintenance connectée. Et je suis accompagné aujourd'hui d'un de nos partenaires, Jim Garside de First Horizon. Alors Jim est anglais. Il va présenter en anglais cette session, même si tous les slides seront en français. Mais si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à nous les poser et je me tâcherai de les traduire de telle manière à ce que Jim puisse répondre. Donc, Jim, if you want to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you, Francois. Yeah, my name's Jim Garside, and we've been acting as partner for RS for some time now. And the presentation that I'm going to deliver in this session is mainly focused around 3D documentation, BIM, and how that can be applied to health and safety benefits. Shall I continue with the presentation?
Yes, please, Jim. Please, you can start.
Okay, thank you. Right then. So yes, so as I said, it's sort of double agenda, I guess. One is to explain the process of 3D documentation and BIM and how the outputs are created and what they look like, but also looking at how health and safety can be applied and can be improved as a result of some of the outputs that we're producing. So in terms of the agenda for the next, I think it's about 45 minutes of discussion or presentation, and then maybe 15 minutes following of discussion if that's required. The agenda is around looking at what is 3D documentation initially, what is all that all about, and BIM, and how does that fit within 3D documentation. A bit of discussion around multidisciplinary project coordination and the concept of multifaceted topics and items for documentation and capture to create a whole rather than individual fragmented elements to produce a full solution rather than an isolated capture method. So we can then go through each of the sort of, we identify there's probably around 6 core services there or topic areas that sort of feed into the 3D documentation space. So we can go through each of those individually to give you a flavour of what they're all about, and then look at what the wider benefits of carrying out 3D documentation, the BIM, what they look like. And following on from that, we'd also touch on the health and safety benefits as well. And I think this will not just be, I think there's many elements to that as well. There's health and safety benefits in the actual capture of the 3D documentation in the first place. There's benefits that will fall out of that in terms of other contractors that may visit the site in the future, but also the operators and the clients themselves. There's lots of different ways in which this can benefit. Okay, so get started. So the first slide is just what is 3D documentation, essentially, and in simple terms, it's basically the capture and the recording of any existing facility in terms of its geometric shape and its real world position. So whereabouts is it in space, and what's the relationship of items within each other. And it's all about capturing this data in the hope to create a true digital twin, which is the term that's very widely used these days, and people have different ideas on what that means. And in terms of, from our perspective, we view that as being the geometric data of the environment, all encompassing, and also the asset information that sits with that. And we think that, from our perspective, that's kind of a digital twin, and it's an exact replica of a facility, basically. And the kind of things, the kind of elements that can build up the digital twin, it's not just, I think most people seem to think that this would be just specific to a building, for example, but it's much wider than that. It could be the building structure, it could be the terrain externally of the estate, it could be street furniture, lamp columns, it could be, which is an important section which we'll cover later, the things and the items that are below the ground that you can't see, like the buried services and cables, the drainage network. It could be more in depth than that in terms of not just looking at the fabric of the building as well. It could be the furniture, fixtures and fittings, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing items. It can even be the living assets, so trees and bushes and other planting. It can be anything that you want it to be, basically. If it can be captured, then it can be included in this digital twin. So I've just got a little slide which I'll just use my screen share for, just to give you a flavour of the types of the variety of different 3D documentation and BIM outputs that we can produce, or that you may produce. I'll just pop that on. Okay, hopefully that's working. So it's just a little slideshow which shows a few different examples just to run through. This is a train shed for a railway operator, where it was important for the roof structure to be documented. This is Brighton Pavilion, which is in the UK. This is another railway station where it's important to get lots of detail, the track, the roof structure. This was for a cement factory, cement plant, where that was assembled separately and virtually assembled. Power stations, many different applications. This is a theatre where you can see a slide through the structure. This was a project where it was done in phases as it was being constructed. This was a new build, and the important information there was to capture all the MEP before the building was sort of plastered and fitted out, so that they didn't miss things, and the outcome was the full detail of the building, what could be seen or not seen. That's a theatre complex and a lawn tennis centre. This is from a power station, much less exciting site, I guess, visually, but still it's very, very important for those to get details of their assets. These are air conditioning units on a roof, sewage treatment works, and the list goes on. So it's just to give you a flavour. I'm not going to go through hundreds of these different slides, but it just gives you a flavour that this can be applied to anything, whether it's real estate, factory environment, petrochemical, rail. it can be used widely across all these different sectors. So I'll just end that now and return back to the slides. Okay. Okay, so this slide is just around the concept of the multidisciplinary project coordination, which we think is really quite important. And it is about, it's the different elements. So you can see the little icons there for a UAV and 3D scanning and BIM and all these other things, and applying those, as I said earlier, in tandem, so that the output is a problem-free, coordinated output, and it makes the client experience, we believe, much better. There's no sort of inconsistencies in how the data and the outputs are produced. They all join together nicely, and it's very coherent. So it's quite an important part of this 3D documentation topic. Okay, so I'll just go through in brief some of the core elements to the 3D documentation. So the first one that I'm sure some of you who are watching this will be aware of, which is 3D laser scanning. And you can see the picture of the chap there. That's a tripod-based static 3D laser scanning. There's many different types that you can deploy. So that's just one. It's probably the most commonly used because it's quite accurate in the way that it's captured. But yet there's just as many other alternatives. For example, mobile solutions that can be handheld or on a vehicle or on a cart or even a backpack. There's lots of different ways, but the most common is the static scan situation. And the outputs for that. So, I mean, basically, I suppose before we look at the outputs, it's basically a device that uses laser light to capture an XYZ, so a 3D position of an environment. So it spins around quite quickly and it captures unbelievably about 2 million points a second. So every second, 2 million 3D points are captured. So in a quite a short space of time, you can be capturing hundreds of millions of points, which gives you quite a comprehensive and valuable output that can be used for many things. So yeah, and the outputs are the 3D point cloud, which is the term which again I'm sure you will probably have already heard of, but it's the idea of all these individual data points that are collected from each scan position are unified to be a single 3D point cloud, which is much more meaningful and usable for the client. And from that, you can produce 2D CAD drawings, BIM models, which is the main focus of our discussion today, animations, imagery, mesh models, lots of different things, and that's kind of what that one's about. So it's very good for capturing data rapidly. So following on from that, and just to give you a flavour of how that works and how that applies to safety as well. So on the left-hand side of this slide, that just shows, that when you use a static scanner, you scan from multiple positions, and then you amalgamate that data together to create a whole rather than a single isolated scan perspective. On the right-hand side, it's the idea is that sort of demonstrates the fact that because the 3D scanner is essentially remote capture, so it doesn't need to physically touch something, then it does bring with it, for the operator as well, actually carrying out the works, it brings some health and safety benefits, clear benefits, obviously, because in this scenario, obviously this is just a bridge example, but it could be anything. It could be steel that's high level in a warehouse. It could be across a motorway or across a river or a cliff face or a steep slope. It could be anything, or even just hot pipe work in a refinery or a power plant. So the point is that previously you would have needed to get out there physically to touch these things and measure these things, but using this technology, that's not needed. So clear health and safety benefits there. So just to give you a flavour of what the point cloud looks like, if you haven't already seen it, this is just an idea of what that looks like. Millions of 3D points pulled together as a point cloud, and that's kind of what they look like, just to give you a flavour. And then the concept then is, as well as the 3D point cloud that comes from the 3D scanner, as well as the other elements that we're going to talk about that contribute to the 3D documentation as a whole and the digital twin as a whole, the idea is that that data is then used to convert into a BIM model, which then has a much more meaningful output, which allows much further uses. Okay, and then the next slide is the CAD and BIM element. I'll not probably dwell on this too much, to be honest, but because I'm sure most people are well aware of CAD and BIM. But from our perspective, it allows much greater control and improved collaboration between different disciplines and different partners. So it's a very valuable tool. And it's a sort of one of the primary platforms for this digital twin and your full asset management solution. And obviously there's many different types of CAD and BIM that can be outputted. BIM, Revit, AutoCAD, lots of different sort of specific platforms that fall into that. So that's the thing, that's the idea, is that once all this data is captured, it's then converted to a BIM output. Okay, so the next item to look at is the UAV surveys or aerial surveys. So these, in the last 5 years or so, 5 years ago, it probably wasn't very widely used, but today they are very, very common, and it definitely brings with it some new perspectives and new possibilities that weren't there before. The ability to just sort of fly around a site, look at, for example, in this example, a roof in detail without having to get physical access is very, very valuable, and you can capture video footage and high definition imagery. Very helpful tool. And again, similarly to the 3D scanning point raised a minute ago, it's the same sort of principle. Again, it's looking at a bridge, but it can be any type of facility. The UAV can basically flies above or alongside of the environment that's to be captured, captures an array of images, and that can all be amalgamated together to create a 3D output, which is of significant use, and it's a lot easier and safer to do it than it would have been previously. So similar slides as shown before. Same principle applies with the UAV on the left-hand side. No need for man access and elevated platforms, or potentially no need. So obviously that brings some significant safety benefits if there's no remedial works required to access. The one on the right is potentially an interesting element to look at. So that's called a clash tolerant drone. So it's still a drone, but it's sort of encased in a lightweight frame that protects the drone, and it allows it to inspect much more in-depth areas. So in amongst steels, for example, and as you can see from the image there on the right, it can sort of fly around and navigate around, and if it bangs into anything else, it's not going to cause it any problem. But you can get detailed information from many intricate structures without needing man access. So the next element is land survey or topographic survey, and that's quite a standard application that's been around for a lot of time, but it's still very, very useful in terms of creating this BIM output and this digital twin. It's used primarily for capturing the external environments of an estate, so the landforms, the banking, the street furniture, trees, etc., etc. And it can capture very accurate data, which then can be included within the BIM model output. And the next slide, which is one that I think is quite important, is the underground utility location. So that's all about the documentation of subsurface pipes, cables, fibre optic cables, drainage routes, anything that you can't see that could potentially cause problems. It's a non-intrusive means of capturing that data and understanding where these items, these service items, exist beneath the surface. Important particularly if you're on a site where construction is planned or a trench needs to be dug to lay another cable. It's really important, obviously, to avoid damage to the service media and the utilities, that you know exactly where they sit and what depth they're at, and that is very, very important part of this, in my opinion. And again, that can also be included within the digital twin output. So that's just an example of this is for a school site. It's only a 2D drawing, but I think it just clearly shows what it can look like in reality. So all the coloured lines that you can see, the thick lines with the sort of lettering within them, they represent services on that site. It wasn't particularly detailed site on the face of it, or they're not normally. But as you can see, if you were planning to do excavation in that area, there's lots of potential hazards there that need to be avoided. And having this sort of information, particularly in a 3D format as well, which we'll go on to show you shortly, then things can be, you can sort of in an informed way plan where excavations should be carried out, or should they be completely avoided. But huge safety benefits on having an understanding of this element. So that is more, the previous slide was in relation to if you had a contractor that was going to come in and do works for the operator or for the client. This device is something that could be very valuable for the client and the operator themselves, and it's using augmented reality. So once you have the utility location information included within the BIM model and the digital twin, then you've got the ability to go out with this relatively inexpensive tool to go out onto your site and visualize exactly where the cables, or in this case, there's a sort of catchment pit and other sort of cables and pipes there, and you can see exactly where they sit underneath the ground. So obviously we wouldn't normally see that, but you're able to do that using this augmented reality tool, and that will be of significant value for some people to make sure that they don't interfere with that if they're planning any construction. So the next slide is another one I'll have to share on. Just put that on now. Hopefully this is working. Okay, yeah, so this is a college or university site, nothing particularly remarkable about it, and you can see there's buildings there and the terrain and street furniture, etc. But I think what's important for this discussion on this topic is what's beneath the ground there, and you can see the relationship of the 3D utility and drainage network in relation to the rest of the site, and how valuable that could potentially be to have a good understanding of that. So I think that this in animation is just to sort of demonstrate the value of the utility location. We'll go back to the slide. Okay, so the next slide is CCTV and drainage. Very similar, I guess, to utility location that I've just mentioned. It's about documenting what's beneath the surface in terms of drainage networks. And in this case, how this works is you basically would thread a CCTV camera on a sort of a reel through the drainage network and document exactly what the condition is like and if there are any defects or issues in that area, and that allows lots of things. It gives you a good understanding of the situation, but again, looking at the safety perspective, it would allow contractors to avoid breaking ground at all, because the principle is that many of the sort of defects could be rectified from within the pipe. So it might be the removal of root ingress or blockages or whatever it might be, or displaced joints, or it might be a relining of a pipe. But the idea is that, again, that can be done without having to dig up the ground and replace a pipe. You can do that in a more non-intrusive way. And the next slide. So that was the key 6 core services that we were looking at. That's sort of an overview of all of those, and this is just a little bit of an overview of what benefits can the 3D documentation and the BIM sort of outputs that you've sort of seen a snippet of there. What are those benefits to an operator? And I guess the first one is the understanding your estate and what assets you have fully, and the ability to sort of interact with that in a 3D and virtual interface is very powerful. And some of these things will sort of lead on to further presentations you've got throughout the 3 days with RS. So I guess this is one part of it, and some of these will lead on to the other elements such as IoT and e-procurement and these types of things. So just centralizing all your asset information in one common data environment is very important and very powerful. And you can use the information that is produced to inform design decisions for either retrofit or refurbish scenarios. And it also supports the optimization of asset performance as well. Using it within a BIM platform, again, it will sort of integrate with many of the other elements of this 3-day event that you will probably speak about. There's a huge value there that you can use the BIM output to leverage some of the other more sort of meaningful benefits like the IoT and asset performance and all these things that were mentioned before. So they're kind of the key benefits from carrying out this, as well as the sort of obvious benefits of knowing and having knowledge of what the estate looks like. So I just wanted to show a little snippet of one of the RS Beauvais clips, just so you can get a feel for what that actually looks like in real terms. I'll just share that screen again. Okay, this is just a 20-second clip of the RS site at Beauvais, and just gives you a feel for the level of detail that can be produced and what sort of visual benefit that could potentially give to somebody. And that can be totally customized. It can include or exclude whatever people feel that they would need as part of an end-to-end solution. Okay, so I'll go back to the presentation. Okay then. So the health and safety benefits, again, we've been through some of the ones that are obvious in terms of the actual capture and potential contractors coming to site and things like that. But I think the main one in terms of an operator's perspective or a client's perspective is this concept of if you've captured a very comprehensive data set of the estate, then it almost alleviates the need for any physical visits to site. So, I mean, some sites, if it's a university, there might not be too risky when visiting those sites physically. But for example, if it's a power station or a train depot, it can, every time someone avoids the need to go to that site, I guess that's a reduced risk for somebody potentially coming to some harm. There's less, if we don't need to, and we've seen all this ourselves in working from home in those last 12 months. I guess if you don't have to visit a site, then there's less travel as well, and a lot of the risk, and everyone probably is quite well aware, is in travel. So if you don't have to travel, then we're minimising the risk there, just in not having to physically visit a site. And obviously, if the amount of data is so comprehensive, which it is, then there's less man hours needed, less time needed to capture things, and less time needed to measure things. So there's a lot of benefits from that also. And to give you a flavour of what that looks like, I was just going to show a couple of examples of the virtual office environment and how you can access that from the comfort of your chair in the office. So I'll just do, hopefully these will work. I'll just show a couple of navigations around these sites. So again, this is the RS Beauvais site, and this is just this is how you could. This is just a free viewing tool. It's nothing out of the ordinary or sort of unusual, but it gives you a very good means of visiting a site and understanding what's there and having a good look around the place without needing to visit there yourself. So you can see you've got different clipping tools to isolate the area you want to look at, and you can see on this example there's quite a lot of detail that can be included. All these different items, the packing bays, the rollers. I think on that there's a IoT device there on the steelwork. There's motors for the conveyor. You can include whatever you like, but it just gives you a very, very powerful means of understanding what you've got on site. And there's lots of different things you can do. You can take measurements, you can take angles, you can clip using a clipping tool to section off areas, or all these different things that you can do. So that's sort of like a BIM platform output. This one is a 360 image view that is almost a byproduct of carrying out the 3D scanning project. And in this, you can jump into any position. This is a castle in Germany, I believe, and you can basically navigate around and see what's there. This is just like I say, a byproduct of getting the 3D documentation is you'll get this as well, and it can be a very useful tool just to understand what's there, and again avoiding the need to visit site. And again, on the same token here, you can, if you want to know the height of that archway, you can just click a couple of buttons and get that sort of level of detail. And if you wanted to know roughly what the area of that particular building was, for example, again, it's just a few clicks and you can identify that area. Obviously, I'm just doing it very crudely, but you can get some very low level sort of basic information quite easily. And again, that's the point I think that we're hoping to make here as well, is that that's clear benefit and avoiding the need to visit site. And I think that is nearly the end of this presentation. Yes, I think that was the last slide. So hopefully I've covered that reasonably well, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions, or Francois can help me if needs be as well. Over to you, Francois.
Thank you, Jim. Merci. Est-ce que vous avez est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Est-ce que ça vous a paru clair dans la présentation? N'hésitez surtout pas, sachant que bien sûr cette présentation sera envoyée à tous les participants de ce webinaire. Donc, et bien sûr, mais évidemment, on pourra répondre à des questions après. Mais en attendant, voilà, est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose, il y a une thématique ou un point sur lequel on pourrait vous répondre? Sachant que, encore une fois, cette visualisation en 3D et la notion de BIM rentre particulièrement dans une notion de RSE, et ça peut être extrêmement important pour des sites, on va dire dangereux, ou des endroits qui sont difficiles qui sont difficiles d'accès. Alors on peut penser à ça peut être des centrales nucléaires, le côté un peu dangereux quand même, ou sensible. Ça peut être des raffineries. Donc, est-ce que euh, est-ce que c'est voilà, c'est toute cette notion sur le côté un peu sécurité aussi des employés. Derrière, on peut le combiner avec la partie IoT et donc visualiser sur votre infrastructure en 3D le positionnement de tous vos capteurs et surtout d'avoir cet aspect de maintenance prédictive où en fait, sur votre visualisation, vous allez pouvoir voir les équipements qui nécessitent une intervention assez rapidement. Donc, et encore une fois, en fonction de la taille de votre site, voilà, le fait d'avoir toute votre infrastructure, votre unité de production en 3D vous donnera en fait une visualisation, et sachant que cette visualisation est aussi possible ou accessible dans la GMAO avec Mobility Work, voilà, dont on a évoqué hier. Et voilà, c'est quelque chose alors c'est modulable, encore une fois, hein, vous pouvez avoir juste la visualisation en 3D, vous pouvez avoir le scan de votre sous-sol pour voir tous les circuits d'eau, de gaz, d'électricité. Vous pouvez avoir toute cette partie intégrée dans une GMAO. Voilà, c'est toute cette notion-là, et toujours dans une logique voilà, d'optimiser les interventions, réduire vos coûts. Et là, par rapport au BIM, c'est vraiment la notion de sécurité aussi qui est mise en avant. Donc, encore une fois, j'insiste, hein, c'est vraiment, tout est modulable. Voilà. Donc, c'est pas tout le package complet, c'est en fonction de votre thématique que vous pouvez prendre tel ou tel sujet. Bon, écoutez, en tout cas, je vous remercie. Thank you very much, Jim, for your presentation.
Okay.
Merci à tout le monde. Je vous donne rendez-vous à la prochaine session de ces webinaires qui auront lieu, enfin, le prochain aura lieu à 16 heures. Je vous remercie beaucoup. Passez une bonne journée. Thank you, Jim. Bonne journée.
Bye bye.